Today on TwinCam we are looking at one of the most desirable yet attainable cars in history. This is a Mk2 Ford Capri, in particular a 1977 Capri 1.6 GL. Ever the masters of marketing, Ford sold the Capri with the iconic line, "the car you always promised yourself." And that wasn't far from the truth. It was a sleek, stylish rear-drive coupe which made you look ever so much cooler than the equivalent Cortina driver, the four-door saloon the Capri was based on. The first Capri was launched in 1969 as a European equivalent for the Mustang, just without the mad V8s. But world events put pay to that idea, and as the Mk2 Capri was launched in 1974, the requirements for a car like this became a bit stricter. The Mark I Capri was a huge success, but the oil crisis and a pickier buyer coaxed Ford into modifying their coupe, making it more user-friendly in an attempt to retain this success and attract a less hardcore buyer. The whole car is bigger, but the proportions change slightly to improve usability. The bonnet is shorter, the interior bigger, and most importantly, there's a hatchback. This was Ford's first foray into hatchbacks, and while the Capri was a bit of a weird place to start, it did make the car much more usable as family transport. The Mark II did retain all of the Capri hallmarks, namely that rear window shape, the long bonnet and the low wide look, but every line is cleaner, more refined and more 1970s, but it keeps a little bit of the muscle where it's most pronounced, up on the bonnet with the lines and the bulge. The front end maybe lacks a little personality and aggression with the large rectangular headlamps, but there's no doubt it's good looking, especially with the Ford script across the black grille. The crease in the doors helps the overall wide stance of the car, and the back, plain as it may be, is just about right. What certainly is of its time is the black vinyl roof that helps with the lower stance and all the chrome that would disappear with the Mark III Capri. From our modern viewpoint, that makes a Mark II quite a lot more eye-catching than a Mark III, because chrome means classic. Note also the little 13-inch wheels. Perfect. Despite the fact that I think it's still really good looking, it lost some of the glamour and exotica of the Mark I. It became more normal. However, this is probably the coolest car in the world. Yes, those MG Metros I videoed last year were pretty cool, but the mad brown interior, a vinyl roof, chrome, and the fact that it's a Capri might eclipse the Metros. There's just something so ridiculously cool about it that I can't quite put my finger on, and maybe it's the same thing that made people buy them in period. I'd never really loved the Capri until now, and while I maintain it's nothing special, it's beginning to reel me in. Under this sleek, stylish body were some pretty humble mechanicals. Let's start with the engines. The Capri was an everyman's car, so you could get it with anything from a little 55 horsepower 1.3 litre cross-flow Kent 4-cylinder all the way up to a 140 horsepower 3 litre Essex V6 in the Capri 3000. By the end of Mark II production though, you could get a 3000 with the X-Pack, making 185 horsepower. This particular example has the 1.6 litre overhead cam Pinto 4-pot and a single carburettor, producing 71 horsepower and 87 pound-feet of torque. Fast, this is not. But it's quick enough to enjoy extending the legs of that iconic power plant. And who could forget the iconic rasp of the Pinto engine? Harnessing those modest power outputs are a 4-speed manual gearbox, then McPherson struts and disc brakes at the front, then a simple live axle on leaf springs with drum brakes at the back. All very simple and all shared with the Cortina. This setup was modified from the Mark I though, with a wider rear track and bigger brakes. Along the theme of added usability, Mark II Capris also had softer suspension than the Mark I. Again, this meant it was less sporting, but it did attract a more casual audience. As I mentioned before, this one is a Capri 1.6 GL. That means it's second up the engine range and third up the trim range, and therefore it's a very good place to see an average Capri. The kind that you saw on every street corner as opposed to a more exotic Capri 3000S. Inside, the Mk2 Capri is very 1970s and very 1970s Ford at that as well. We have lots of wood, lots of black vinyl, and also lots and lots of brown vinyl on the seats and brown cloth as well. And a lovely perforated headlining, slightly grubby on this one, but who cares. In here it feels very, very much like a cockpit, so the glass area is very big, but also very close around you. So the windscreen is very, very close, the dashboard is very, very small. Of course, that's a feature of most older cars, but it gives you a better feeling of control over a car. It makes it feel a little bit smaller, and that's good. Looking out of the windscreen, you see that massive bonnet bulge there, which doesn't look quite as big from outside of the car, but from in here looks enormous, and that's definitely a good thing. But where you actually need the space, i.e. down around your legs, there is an awful lot of room. The dashboard really slopes in, and so there is plenty enough room in here to move about. It feels pretty much as big as a Cortina because, well, it is. This dashboard is completely custom for the Capri though, but again, it feels very, very 1970s Ford. You have this, which I always believed was fake wood, but somebody told me about the Mark V Cortina that it was actually real wood. I don't know whether I believe them, definitely not on this one anyway, but who knows. Somebody will inevitably tell me. You have this wraparound section here with your wood and with the instruments, and we'll start there. You don't have a ref counter on this particular model, the 1.6 GL, just a speedometer on the right with an odometer in it, but no trip, and then a temperature gauge and a fuel level there. We are still in the era of those amazing American Ford icons for the fuel level and temperature gauge, and they look wonderful. This steering wheel, of course, isn't the original steering wheel, as you may have guessed, but this car didn't have the original Mark II wheel in it anyway. It had a Mark I wheel, and so the owner has put this one in because it's a little bit smaller and it's nice of him to use it. A couple of warning lights around the outside, so you have brakes, oil, I'm going to guess main beam, although I can't see, and ignition, I'd guess. Again, you have an indicator telltale in the middle, just the one, and on the left here you have your switch for your dimmer for your gauges. Two little vents both on the outside here. I can't believe that these really carry much air through at all, but again, you could just wind down the keep fit windows. Lovely trimmed in chrome, of course. They're the only bits of chrome on the interior are on the door card here. There is no door pocket down at the bottom, just a bit of carpet, but there's a chrome strip around there, an armrest here, which is nice, and a door pull, and a little door pull there. Doesn't feel the best made car, but it feels like every other 1970s Ford, which is acceptable. The driving position is really quite good for a car of this age. The pedals feel in pretty much the right position, even if they're slightly over to the right, and the steering wheel is right in front of you. All very, very good. The seats are quite comfy, and they're quite supportive as well, but not bolster-wise, so you would fall out of them ever so slightly, even if there are raised a little bit here, but they're very squishy, soft seats, so nice to sit in. But maybe not the best for performance driving. But even so, the seats are very nice nonetheless. There are no proper headrests, but you do have a raised section here at the back in brown vinyl, of course. And so it all feels very, very nice. Everything comes to hand perfectly well. The steering wheel is in the perfect position. The pedals are all very nice, as you'd expect them to be. There's a little footrest to the left of the clutch pedal, but it's not a proper footrest, but it's very good for a car of this era because not many cars did have a clutch footrest. And the gear lever, of course, here in a very nice position, and it's a little stubby gear lever with a wonderful little snickety gear change. Even if the throw is quite long, the change itself is very, very nice. So 4-speed gearbox in this. You could also get an automatic if you wanted it, but realistically you go for the manual, wouldn't you? And it's pushed down and up there for reverse. The stalks, there are 3 stalks on a Capri and on many 1970s Fords. The left one controls your indicators, your main beam, and your horn. Very nice. And on the right hand side you have your wipers, so 2-speed wipers, and then down for intermittent, I think. I'm not 100% sure. And then push in for wash. But I believe, yes, the wash is always live on a Ford of this era, so I'm not going to push that in much more because I'll get washer fluid everywhere. The stalk behind that right-hand stalk is for your lights. So up once for side lights and then up twice for dipped beam. Below and to the left of the steering wheel is a little choke lever, for this car does have a manual choke. It is very, very stiff though, so I'm not sure what I may be doing wrong there, but there is your choke. And then to the right down here is your hazard switch, which makes a very slow, if very nice, analog relay sound. There are 4 switches across the centre here, one for your fog lamps, one for your rear wiper, of course, because this is a hatchback and you get a rear wiper on it, one for your rear wash, and then one for your heated rear window. These switches don't feel particularly good quality, but they're fine for the era, I suppose. Above them you have the heater controls, which are the usual rather dreadful, I'll be honest, Ford heater controls at the time. Twin speed fan, which is nice, but all very cheap switches, and of course these sliders for their direction and for the heat. Now they're a very, very small little area, so if you've got particularly big fingers, then maybe you'll have a little bit of difficulty there. But above that is a radio. Of course this isn't the original, but that is where your radio is on a Capri. Now, as much as the Capri is a very low car, you feel like you're sitting very low within it. Not because you actually are, but because the door line raises up towards the front. So you sit right in line with the top of the bonnet. You can see that bonnet bulge and you feel much sportier than you maybe actually are, but that's a fantastic design touch. Over on the left-hand side is a rather large glove box, and in the centre you have this little storage tray here, although things may move around. It's probably a good place for your phone, and you have a little quartz clock down there. You do have an armrest and a little centre cubby hole here, which isn't enormous, but for a car this size it's nice to have this kind of storage, and for a car from the 1970s it's very well trimmed, and it's full of lead replacement, lead additive stuff, typical for a car of this age. Now, below this line of switches here is the ashtray and the cigarette lighter there, and that is an industrial size ashtray. It is absolutely enormous, but I suppose when you're driving around in your Mk2 Capri with your chest hair and your medallion, you're going to be smoking enough cigarettes to very quickly fill up that ashtray. In the back of the Mk2 Capri you have, again, lovely brown vinyl and brown cloth. That's very nice. Quite buckety in the back, just the 2 seats, but that's all you expect really. But there's quite a lot of room back here for such a small, sleek car with, you know, a sloping roofline at the back. There's more than enough headroom for me. I'm about 5'9". Maybe someone who's 6 foot would find it a bit of a squeeze back here, but there's more than enough room for me. And in my driving position, there's enough leg room as well. Not stacks and stacks of room, but your feet slide nicely under the driver's seat, and it's quite a nice place to be back here. There's loads of glass as well, so it feels quite airy. You don't feel hemmed in back here. There's loads of room, more than enough room for 2 people to sit here, and have enough elbow room as well. And of course, because the 1970s, you have your own little ashtray back here. Each person on each side does. Now, that sloping roofline does mean that if you sit right back against the, not really a headrest, but raised back of the seat, which is very, very comfy, by the way. I could spend quite a lot of time back here. You get less and less headroom, and the rear screen is right here because, of course, this is a hatchback. This is the first Capri to be a hatchback, and these seats actually fold down, making the car a lot more practical. Let's go have a look in that boot now. And in that boot you find quite a lot of space really. You could definitely fit quite a lot in here. Of course it is quite a long car as well. Of course those seats fold down again, so you can fit lots of stuff in here, including bumpers for an MG midget, as the owner has told me. There is a proper full-size spare wheel under there, so it is quite a shallow boot floor as well, considering the leaf springs and the rear axle and all that kind of stuff. But a Capri that can actually be used. How wonderful. The Mk2 Capri unfortunately wasn't quite the success that Ford wanted it to be, and it didn't emulate the success of the Mk1 Capri either, and most put this down to how soft it was. You see, Capris were primarily bought by men that wanted something more than a run-of-the-mill family saloon, but couldn't quite afford to get something more exotic. The top-of-the-range 3-litre models and special editions such as the JPS added desirability, but that aura began to drain away as the Mark II lost the edge of the Mark I, the 1970s progressed, and cars like the Opel Manta were launched. It was important for Ford to make this car genuinely able to carry a small family, and that requirement may ultimately have been its downfall. It became normal, and eventually a bit naff. I'm going to explore that and much more in next week's video. But until then, thank you very much for watching. Please do click like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to TwinCam as well. It really helps, and you'll be able to catch next week's video on a Mark III Capri 2.8 injection.